This video was brought to you by our sister channel, TLDR Business. On Wednesday, after weeks of speculation and denial, Russia's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, and commander-in-chief, Sergei Surovikin, officially announced that Russia would be withdrawing from Kherson city in order to re-establish defenses on the east bank of the Dnipro River. Now, while Ukrainian officials have expressed some skepticism, it looks clear that the Russians have indeed surrendered Kherson, and this is obviously a pretty significant embarrassment for both the Russian army and the Kremlin. So in this video, we're going to take a look at what's happened, why the Russians have surrendered, and what all of this means for the war going forward. So let's get right into it. As we detailed in our video on Tuesday, for the last few weeks there's been near endless speculation that the Russians are planning on giving up Kherson. The 20,000 or so Russian troops in the city have been basically cut off from the rest of the Russian army since the Ukrainians started shelling the Antonovsky Bridge and the Novokakova Dam, the two largest crossings in the area. And more than that, Russian positions within the city have been under increasing pressure since the successful Ukrainian counteroffensive in September. As such, Russian occupying authorities started evacuating the 60,000 or so civilians left in the city in mid-October, warning of an imminent Russian offensive. And over the weekend, Putin himself encouraged civilians to leave the city. And just last week, it was reported that Russian troops themselves were leaving government buildings and checkpoints. This surrender of Kherson was finally confirmed by the defense minister and commander-in-chief on Wednesday afternoon, who said that they were leaving to protect the lives of their troops. Now, it's worth watching this announcement, not least because it might be a significant moment in history. Former Kremlin advisor and hardline Russian nationalist Sergei Markov has already described it as Russia's worst geopolitical loss since the Soviet Union collapsed.
Товарищ министр обороны, всесторонне оценив сложившуюся ситуацию, предлагается занять оборону по левому берегу реки Днепр. Понимаю, что это очень непростое решение. В то же время мы сохраним самое главное – жизни наших военнослужащих и в целом боеспособность группировки войск, держать которую на правом берегу в ограниченном районе бесперспективно. Кроме того, высвободится часть сил и средств, которая будет задействована для активных действий, в том числе наступательного порядка на других направлениях в зоне проведения операции.
Сергей Владимирович, согласен с вашими выводами и предложениями. Для нас жизнь и здоровье российских военнослужащих всегда является приоритетом. Мы должны принимать во внимание и угрозу для гражданского населения. Убедитесь, что все желающие из числа гражданского населения смогли выехать. Приступайте к отводу войск и примите все меры, чтобы обеспечить безопасную переброску личного состава, вооружения и техники за реку Днепр.
Есть. Маневр войск будет осуществлен в ближайшие сроки. Соединение части займут подготовленные в инженерном отношении оборонительные рубежи и позиции на левом берегу реки Днепр. Доклад закончен.
Now, originally, Ukrainian officials were skeptical of this announcement. On Wednesday, Zelensky took a cautious tone, insisting that Ukraine would move carefully.
Троху рухаємось, укріпляємо позиції крок за кроком. В інформаційному просторі сьогодні дуже багато радощів і зрозуміло чому, але емоції наші мають бути стриманими завжди під час війни. Годувати ворога усіма деталями наших операцій точно не буду, чи то на півдні, чи то на сході, чи то будь-де іще. Коли буде наш результат, кожен це побачить обов'язково. Може це звучить не так, як хтось зараз очікує, може не так, як у новинах, але потрібно розуміти, ніхто ні звідки просто так не йде, якщо не відчуває сили. Ворог не робить нам подарунків, не робить жестів доброї волі. Ми все це виборюємо.
Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to the head office of the president of Ukraine, went on to claim that Kyiv saw no signs of a Russian retreat and that Ukraine would move on the basis of intelligence data, not staged television statements. However, as the day wore on, it started to look like the Russians had indeed abandoned Kherson, with other significant figures in the Russian military admitting that their forces had indeed retreated from Kherson, and praising Surovkin's pragmatism. Similarly, satellite data is now showing the Russians are indeed setting up new defensive positions on the east bank of the Dnipro, and new satellite images from Thursday even suggest that they've established trenches in northern Crimea, which gives you a sense of just how bad the Russians themselves expect things to get. By Thursday morning, it looked like the Ukrainians had been convinced. Zelensky appointed 4 district heads for Kherson's west bank, which suggests that the Ukrainians are planning on a return to Kherson very soon. And Podolyak sent out a tweet suggesting that while Russian forces had mostly left, they'd essentially booby-trapped the city with mines and artillery. All in all then, it now really looks like the Russians have actually left Kherson, and this is pretty embarrassing for them. Not least because Putin claimed to have annexed Kherson just a couple of months ago. But as well as being politically embarrassing, the loss of Kherson means that the Russians will have lost access to the northern Crimean Canal, which routed water from the Dnipro River to Crimea and provided 85% of Crimea's water. And it's not even just about water, because Ukraine's success here will also help keep together the pro-Ukraine coalition in the West, even if energy prices spike over the winter, which is good news for the West. Unsurprisingly though, the retreat from Kherson hasn't gone down very well on the other side. Russian nationalist Telegram channels were furious about the announcement, and Russian state media took a conspicuously dejected tone. Predictably, some Russian nationalists have called on Putin to escalate. Markov, the former Kremlin advisor we mentioned earlier, has even called for a general mobilization. However, if anything, Putin seems to be going in the opposite direction. On Wednesday evening, the Russian Foreign Ministry suddenly announced that Russia is open to negotiations with Ukraine. Quote, taking into account the realities that are emerging at the moment. So it really does look like the Kremlin is more serious about peace negotiations than ever before. And it's probably no coincidence that this comes just a few days after Reuters reported that the Biden administration was privately pressuring Kyiv to begin peace negotiations. Now, obviously, all of the usual caveats apply. You can't really trust what the Kremlin says, and it's possible that all of this is just a ploy to buy the flailing Russian army some time. But at least superficially, negotiations do seem more likely now than at any point in the previous 9 months. Ultimately, though, we'll have to watch developments very carefully to see what happens next. So if you want to make sure you don't miss a thing, then subscribe to TLDR EU. And you might also want to check out our sister channel, TLDR Business, where we just posted a video about all of the Elon Musk Twitter drama and how he may well have killed his $44 billion investment in just over 2 weeks. The link to the channel and the video are in the description, and we'd really appreciate your support. Thank you.